everyone. Back in session, People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Balian, is there agreement about these exhibits that people wish to display?
Yes, we don't, the defense at this juncture is not seeking to show anything of their exhibits at this time.
So you have your next
Yes.
witness, or
Yes.
is this again a recorded testimony?
Yes, it is. So the people would call, it's going to be Dr. Albert Kuperman, and it's a recorded, stipulated videotape testimony from a previous hearing. May I mark the DVD as People's, we're on 49, I believe?
Yes.
And I may mark the transcript as People's 49A. And we prepared to begin playing.
There you go.
Yes. Did the court already get the transcript? No.
I don't have my transcript yet.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. We would call Dr. Albert Kuperman.
Sorry.
Do we have it? Yep, that's it.
Sure.
February 13th.
I know, but it doesn't have enhancements.
Mr. Balian, has this been 4 years?
Enhancements is one of the options.
Has it really?
That time flies when you have.
You're getting to be my old friends.
Yeah.
My old friend too.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please come stand in the witness room. Please raise your right hand. Raise your hand. You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give will cause something before this court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state and spell your first and last name.
Albert, A-L-B-E-R-T, Kuperman, K-U-P-E-R-M-A-N.
Thank you.
Stanley, you may proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Kuperman, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Where do you live?
In Manhattan, New York City.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the trip out here. I know it was easy for you, but I think all sides would appreciate what you've gone through to come here today, so thank you very much. Okay. How old are you?
85,
What's your birthday?
August 1, 1931.
Okay. I'm going to be asking you some questions today about some events that occurred more than 30 years ago. So I want to make sure you understand, and just let me know if you do, that it's perfectly acceptable to say, you know what, I really don't remember. If you don't remember something, can you tell us that?
Sure.
It's also, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I just can't answer that question, I don't know. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. And can you promise to do that if that's the case?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Also, I want to make sure you understand, if I ask you what you had for breakfast this morning, do you think you'd be able to answer me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you. You don't have to tell us what you ate for breakfast. I hope you did eat breakfast. That's the most important meal of the day. I'm home. But if I were to ask you, what did you eat for breakfast Tuesday a month ago? Do you think you would be able to tell me?
No.
No. Okay, I'm guessing if I asked you what you had for breakfast back in 1982 on a certain day, you'd have no clue, right? Right. Do you understand the difference, though? Let's assume a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago, you woke up in the morning, something significant happened. Someone came to your door, you opened the door, and put it under your face. Subsequently, the police came and you were interviewed. Subsequently, you were interviewed a couple more times after that. You understand the distinction that that's something that might give more significance to your memories on that particular day?
Sure.
Before we get to the meat of the matter, did some things happen that you're aware of while you're being called here today in 1982 that caused you to be here today?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Did something happen in 1982 that caused you to be contacted by the police in this particular case?
Yes.
And through the subsequent years, you've been contacted by the police on more than one occasion, right?
Right.
Let me just ask you, how long have you lived in New York?
Excuse me?
How long have you lived in New York?
I've lived in New York since I was born in New York City.
Okay.
I have lived elsewhere as well.
Okay. And are you currently working?
I'm currently, yes. This is
Are you currently employed?
No.
No.
I'm retired.
You're retired. Congratulations. Where did you work before you were retired?
Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City.
In New York City. How long did you work at Albert Einstein College of Medicine?
About 40 years.
Do you work at all in retirement right now?
I go into my office. They gave me an office, a little office with a computer and some support, and I go in once a week.
And when you say they, are you talking about Albert Einstein?
At Albert Einstein.
So you would still in some capacity are affiliated with
Yes.
that institution?
Yes.
Dr. Kuperman, will you please wait until the question is completed before you give your answer?
Okay.
It's for our reporters.
Sure.
Do you still have access to the facility?
Yes.
Do you still have access to the people currently in the facility?
Yes.
You have access, if you asked, to records at the facility, most likely.
Probably.
What is your educational background?
I have a PhD in pharmacology, which is a biomedical science, and I have some postdoctoral training.
Where did you get your PhD?
Where did I get my degree? At Cornell University, Graduate School of Medical Sciences.
Also in New York?
Also in Manhattan, yes.
Sounds like you are kind of a New York guy. You've been there your whole life.
Right.
You started there and you still live in
Right.
Okay. After Cornell, what did you do?
After Cornell, I joined the faculty at the New York University School of Medicine, and then went back to Cornell University Medical College, and then joined the City University of New York faculty, and after that joined the Rockefeller Foundation as a field staff member and was stationed in Bangkok, Thailand for about 7 years.
The Rockefeller Foundation, is that some sort of a grant?
Excuse me,
The Rockefeller Foundation, what is that?
Rockefeller Foundation is a major organization that provides funding for various good works in education and medicine and many other fields.
And I'm sure you're understating it, but I assume that's not something that's easy to get. You don't just come out of school and are offered that position, right?
No.
That's very, very prestigious.
It's a well-known, well-established foundation, and I was very privileged. I feel privileged to have worked for it.
And you did that, you said, for about 6 or 7 years in Bangkok?
Yes.
What did you do there?
There was a university development program that the Rockefeller Foundation established in several countries, including Thailand. And my job was to assist in the development of a new medical school and a graduate school in medical sciences.
And when
when you...
I was also chair of the Department of Pharmacology in the new medical school.
Okay. You have some sort of a passion in pharmacology and education?
Yes.
Yeah. After you finished that position in Bangkok, where did you go? Let me guess, you came back to New York, right?
I went back to Manhattan and was located in the headquarters of the Rockefeller Foundation in Manhattan for about a year in a kind of a program to further develop my skills in international development. I spent some time in classes at Columbia University during that period as well.
Okay. And after that, is that when you joined Albert Einstein?
I read an advertisement in Science magazine for the position of Associate Dean for Medical Education at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And during my time in Bangkok, I had developed a great interest in the educational aspects of medical school, which was kind of different from my research experience, and it seemed like a very interesting position, and therefore applied for the position and got it.
Got it, okay. And that position was the Assistant Dean of Education?
Dean of Educational Affairs.
And for how many years did you hold that position?
From 1975 to 2009.
And then you said you retired in what year?
A successor was appointed to my position. I stayed on for 4 more years in a position as senior advisor in the dean's office to help my successor develop her capacity and skills for the job, and continue doing some of the work that I've been doing as the Dean for Education.
Okay. So you were the Dean for Education from 1975 through 2009.
Right.
And that's at Albert Einstein.
Right.
Where is that located, by the way?
In the Bronx. Right.
What type, is that strictly, is it a research facility?
Albert Einstein College of Medicine is a very strong research facility and a teaching facility, and is affiliated with hospitals as well.
Can you just briefly describe for the court the Dean of Education? What is that? What are your duties?
Kind of responsible for the management and development of the educational program for medical students.
Okay. And what were your primary functions as the Dean of Education?
To make sure that all aspects of processes and procedures and offices responsible for medical education work to their fullest capacity. So there were many units that were under my oversight and management and budget, like the admissions office, the Dean for Students office, the evaluation office, informatics office, diversity office, and even the library, actually.
So these departments were all underneath you being the Dean of Education?
Right.
And above you would be who, I guess?
The Dean.
The Dean. So
The Dean.
The Dean. So there's the Dean, and then underneath the Dean was yourself?
Right.
Okay. And then underneath yourself were the heads of all the various departments you discussed?
Directors and various assistant deans.
Okay. What hospitals, if any, is Albert Einstein Medical School affiliated with? And in particular, let's just talk about the period from 1978 through 1982.
The 2 main hospitals were the Bronx Municipal Hospital Center and Montefiore Hospital. Montefiore Hospital Medical Center.
And the Bronx, you said the Bronx Municipal Hospital Center?
Bronx Municipal Hospital Center.
And what is that commonly known as?
Jacobi the original name was Jacobi Hospital. It was Jacobi and Van Etten, and then it became Bronx Municipal.
The Albert Einstein Medical School
if you could just briefly describe for the court how selective is it? How difficult is it for someone to become a medical student?
At the time,
Yeah, let's talk about that.
you're talking about that period of time in the
Yeah,
1980s.
Yes.
We would get about 8,000 to 10,000 applications for a class of 176. We would screen out all except about 1,100 applicants, and then we would interview about 500 or 600 of those 1,100, and finally accept a class of 176.
Suffice it to say, it's not.
It's difficult. Yes.
You take the brightest of the brightest.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that if someone was not qualified to be there, someone could not undergo the rigorous curriculum that was required there, they would not be admitted? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you some questions. You're probably going to look at me and say, these are so basic, you should know the answers to these. But you understand, I went to law school, which is a lot easier than medical school. Sorry for all the lawyers here, but I'm sure that's true. And I don't know about a lot of the procedures there, okay? I know the basics, but how many years is medical school?
4 years.
4 years. And the first year, what is the first year like for a medical student? And let's just talk about specifically the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, and let's further limit it to what it was like for that student there from that period of time in the late 1970s and the early 1980s.
About 95% of the time during those first 2 years would be spent in various biomedical science courses, both in lectures and laboratory and some small group sessions as well. And the other 5% would be clinical type teaching.
And where does that all take place?
It takes place at the medical school primarily, except there are some classes which require you to go out into the community and various outpatient settings.
Are those like long periods of time, or are we talking short periods as part of a larger class?
One afternoon a week, divided up into small groups.
So that's not like, you're familiar with the term clerkships or rotations?
It's not a clerkship, no.
You're talking about as part of a class. The
Right.
teacher might say, hey, tomorrow afternoon, we're going to go try some in-the-field hands-on work in this area. I understand.
That's in order to develop your skills in physical diagnosis, as well as to provide you with experience with patients in various community settings.
So the first 2 years is this classroom-like work that you just described, is that right?
Right.
And this occurs, I take it, in a classroom setting of some sort of a lecture hall?
A lecture hall, large lecture hall.
A large lecture hall? I guess your student-teacher ratio is not like 10 to 1 like some of the grade schools are today.
All right.
No, okay. So, are there any clerkships or rotations the first 2 years of medical school?
No.
So what is life like then for a medical student at Albert Einstein during that specific period of time when they proceed to their third year and their fourth year?
In the third year, we have clerkship rotations in pretty much all of the basic clinical disciplines: medicine, surgery, psychiatry, pediatrics, OBGYN, family medicine.
And we don't need all the specifics of exactly which ones there are, but those you mentioned are all approximately in the third year of medical school?
These are in the third year.
And how about in the fourth year?
In the fourth year, there are also a few clerkships, neurology being one of them, a sub-internship in medicine or pediatrics being another, and what we call an ambulatory care program being the third. The rest of the time are various electives in clinical specialties or in research and community-based work.
Okay. And these electives you just mentioned,
the electives,
Community-based support.
community-based
Work.
community-based programs.
These electives you've mentioned, do these also occur outside of the hospital? Outside of the, I'm sorry, the medical school?
An elective can be taken in hospitals anywhere in the country and even in the world.
I guess what I was trying to ask.
Okay,
Yeah.
we really need to take turns speaking, and that is because no one has only 2 takers.
I apologize, sir. It's my fault.
And take down the words of either the lawyer or the witness, but not both simultaneously. I recognize ordinarily conversation that tends to overlap, but we can't do it this way in this proceeding. You may proceed.
Thank you. I apologize, sir. I will do mine. What I'm asking you is, your 3rd and 4th year as a medical student, are there any classes that take place in the classroom at the medical schools?
When you talk about classroom, you're talking about a room the students sit and listen to someone talk.
Yes.
There may be a few like that, but very few. It's mainly interaction with patients.
So your 3rd and 4th year, you're working in clerkships where you're interacting with patients.
Right.
Your 3rd and 4th year, you're not taking classes at the medical school.
Right.
And if you were, I assume those would be some specialty thing. It wouldn't be the norm.
Right.
Let's describe these clerkships. For those of us who don't understand what they are, that take place in the 3rd and 4th year. Where do these take place?
The required clerkships that I mentioned, neurology and some internship and ambulatory care, would take place in one of our affiliated hospitals, Montefiore Bronx Municipal Hospital Center, and could be another hospital as well.
So these clerkships take place off campus.
Off campus.
They take place in a hospital setting.
Right.
And is that so the students actually get to work in the hospital with physicians learning their craft?
Right.
Approximately how long are these clerkships your 3rd and 4th year?
Minimum of 4 weeks, maximum of 8 weeks.
Who supervises these clerkships?
Physicians who have been assigned as chiefs of whatever the electives are.
And these
Whatever
physicians,
the clerkships are, sorry.
and these physicians are located at the hospital setting where the students
They're
are.
located, yeah. They work in those hospitals.
Again, will you wait until the question's finished? Before you give your answer, the attorney was paused a moment mid-question, and you anticipated what he was asking and gave your answer, but please be patient and wait for him to finish. Thank you, Doctor.
Right.
Who grades, evaluates, I should say, the students in a clerkship?
The various physicians who are interacting with the students during their clerkship experiences.
Okay. And are the students given daily responsibilities at the hospital where they're located for that month?
Sure.
Who do the students report to on a daily basis to tell them what to do, to tell them where they're supposed to be, to tell them what they're supposed to be doing?
The physicians in charge of that particular teaching program.
Is it a fair statement that the medical school helps assign the student and place the student in a clerkship at the hospital, selects physicians at the hospital you affiliate yourself with that you trust are going to educate your student,
Yes.
and then leaves the day-to-day responsibilities for managing that student, for educating that student to the hospital? Was that a fair statement?
You'll have to repeat the statement again.
Is it a fair statement that the medical school selects hospitals that they trust to educate their students,
Yes.
chooses and helps place those students at the hospital and leaves the daily management and education of those students to the physicians you've selected at that hospital.
Correct.
And I guarantee you that you have way more education and are infinitely smarter than I am. So if I say something that's not correct, and I'm not perfect, will you please correct me?
Yes.
Thank you. You said there's approximately, did you say 176 students per class?
Yes.
And there's 4 years of medical school?
Yes.
So is it fair to say that at any given point in time during a year, there's 750 to 800 students at Albert Einstein Medical School?
Yes.
This is the state that existed in the late 1970s, early 1980s, correct?
Right.
All these questions I'm asking about, I'm limiting to that period of time. Do you understand that?
Right.
And you've been there, you were there for approximately 40 years.
Right.
So have you then been responsible for, as the Dean of Education, approximately between 6,000 and 7,000 students, almost 7,000 students over your career there?
I guess you could say that.
Do you remember them all?
That's not
No. Do you remember some of them?
Yes.
As the Dean of Education, what were your daily interactions with the students in particular, if any?
My main interaction with the students was, first of all, as a teacher in the pharmacology course. But in my capacity as the Dean for Education, students would come to me to discuss their career interests and ask my advice about that in terms of how they could prepare for it effectively. But mainly, students would come to me to discuss special programs which we offer beyond the required clerkships, beyond the required courses, in research, in global health programs, and community-based programs.
You said research, global health, and community-based?
Right.
Were these programs that you had particular interest in, that you were in charge of?
Yes.
Okay. So, other than having a student who's in your pharmacology class, other than having a student who pops in your office to ask you questions about their career, and other than a student who has an interest in one of these specific programs that you were in charge of, research, global health, and the third one you mentioned,
Community-based.
community-based. Other than those students, did you have much interaction at all with the other students?
Occasionally, there might be some specific problem that a student has that they want to discuss, but usually that's under the purview of the Dean of Students.
Okay. Well, if a student had an issue or problem with a teacher, a particular teacher, who would they call or go to?
That would be the Dean of Students.
If a student had a particular issue or problem with a particular class, who would they call?
The Dean of Students.
If a student had a particular issue or had a particular problem with another student, who would they call?
The Dean of Students.
What about with a grade, an issue with a grade?
Definitely the Dean of Students.
If they called you, what would you tell them?
Go call the Dean of Students.
It sounds like, let me just ask this. Who had more interaction with the students? On a one-to-one basis, you or the Dean of Students?
Well, I wouldn't put it in terms of more or less. We had different interactions.
And I'm talking about students who weren't involved in one of those three programs you mentioned, who weren't in your pharmacology class, or who weren't popping in to ask you for career advice. Who, under those circumstances, would have more daily interaction with the students?
The Dean of Students.
Who would have more interaction with the students? The Dean of Students or the professors who are teaching them their lectures? On day-to-day
It would still be the dean of students, yeah.
The dean of students would have more interaction with an individual student than their teacher in the classroom?
Yeah, the interaction between the teacher and the student in a classroom is kind of formal. I mean, once the professor who's teaching that class leaves the classroom, that's pretty much the end of it.
Okay. All right. All right, so other than those specific categories of students we mentioned, it sounds like in your role as the dean of students, you didn't have time to have much interaction with the students on a one-on-one basis, right? Did you answer? You said, I didn't hear your answer.
Could you repeat the question again?
I said,
Pretty sure I'm answering it.
oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the dean of students who was underneath you at the time,
Right.
or under your supervision, I should say.
Right.
Who was that?
John Cook.
John Cook. And is that the person who we may have been calling Gene Cook?
Yes.
Is he French?
Yes.
Okay.
J-E-A-N, John?
Is it J-E-A-N?
J-E-A-N.
John.
But he has a Haitian background and he preferred to be called Jean, actually.
Okay.
Most people call him Gene.
Okay. What did you call him?
Gene.
Would he correct you or no? Would he correct you? Did he correct you when you called him Gene?
Sometimes.
Okay. He likes to be called John?
Yes.
Can we call him John today then? What years was he the dean of students? Dean of student affairs?
When I arrived there in 1975, he was already the dean of students, and he remained in that capacity until 1988.
And what were his primary functions as the dean of students?
Interacting with students with respect to issues and problems they might be having with their courses. And he also was responsible for writing the so-called Dean's Letter, or recommendation to a residency program after graduation.
Let's talk about that for a second. We've talked about clerkships and rotations. Those occur your third and fourth year. After your fourth year, I take it, if you pass everything, you graduate. Is that right? Are you a doctor then?
You're a doctor, you get your MD degree,
Okay.
but you're not licensed to practice until you complete a residency.
Okay, so if I complete 4 years of medical school, I have the title doctor, but I can't go out and treat patients.
Definitely not.
So what do you have to do after that?
You have to take at least a 3-year residency program.
And that, where does that occur?
That occurs in various hospital settings.
How do you get selected for a hospital? Do you choose? Does someone else choose for you?
You choose the hospitals you would like to study your particular specialty at, but the hospitals also have to choose you. And it's a matching program. The hospitals rank each applicant, and the students rank the hospitals, and it ends up in a match.
Sounds like a dating game.
Yeah. Now it's all done with the computer.
Yeah. So what role did Dean Cook have in that process?
He wrote the Dean's Letter for each student. He had to meet with the students first, discuss their career plans, give them advice with respect to the kinds of hospitals they might apply to, and even advice with respect to the specialty that they're interested in. As a student may think they're qualified for a certain specialty, which the dean for students might have other ideas about, depending on the student's performance.
And he did that every year?
Right.
For every student?
For every student.
Okay. And that's, you said, called the match?
That's the match.
Okay. Do you know where John Cook is today?
He passed away several years ago.
I'm going to be asking you questions about particular students, particular events that occurred many, many years ago in 1980, early 1980s, late 1970s. You're familiar with this particular case? In general, what this case is about, are you?
Right.
Have you read media accounts of it over the years.
Yes.
Have you watched a documentary called The James?
No.
Whatever we call it, did you watch it?
I haven't watched any film, video relating to the Durst situation.
Have you seen a movie called All Good Things?
No.
But you have read various media accounts over the years.
Yes.
So what I want to ask you is, first of all, do you acknowledge that sometimes it might be difficult to conflate what you've read versus what you remember?
I acknowledge that, yes.
And being aware of that, do you believe that you can separate it and tell us only what you remember from being there, from seeing it, from hearing it, versus from what you read?
To the best of my ability,
And do you believe you can do that?
yes.
If at some point you get to the point where you say, you know what, I'm not sure if what I'm telling you is a specific memory of mine versus something I've read, can you promise that you'll stop me, stop us, and tell us that?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know, or were you aware of a medical student named Kathleen Durst?
Yes.
And was she a medical student at Albert Einstein Medical School?
Yes.
At what period of time?
1979, 80, 81.
Okay. Did you ever see her around campus?
Yes.
How often would you see her around campus? Just talk about seeing her.
You mean just see her passing by or walking
Yes.
by? I couldn't really tell you.
Was it more than one occasion?
I might have seen her a dozen times.
Okay. Do you have specific memories of Kathy Durst?
Yes.
What she looks like?
Yes.
By the way, have any other, I'm going to jump to the punchline a little bit, but since Kathy Durst, have any other medical students at your school in the 40 years you were there ever just vanished, disappeared?
No.
So, based upon that reason, do you have some specific memory of her? What she looks like?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
That's fair. Thank you for letting me know that. Let me just ask you this. From seeing her, what was your impression of her?
Well, I did have a discussion with her, talked with her twice in a very formal setting.
Okay.
She struck me as a very bright and attractive woman who always just seemed to look very good in terms of her dress. In those days, students were a little different, in the late 70s, they were kind of rebellious and dressed accordingly. And Kathy was very smart looking, best way I could describe it, and very bright.
You trying to say that?
And this is based mainly on two discussions, two informal meetings I had with her.
As alone or as well as seeing her?
Oh, no, and one of them, another person was present.
I'm sorry, I wasn't asking if you were alone with her. I
I'm
was
sorry.
asking what you're saying is based strictly on those two meetings, or those two meetings coupled with the dozen or so times you saw her around campus?
Probably a few times I saw her around, yeah.
So, at least based on her outward appearance, how she held herself, how she dressed, she didn't appear to have the same kind of rebellious, maybe, attitude or demeanor that the other students.
Definitely not.
I don't know if the judge will let me ask you, but is it different today? Are the students not rebellious anymore? Do they not dress sloppy anymore?
I didn't hear that.
Are the students dressing any different today?
Oh,
Rebellious?
yeah, they're different.
They're different. In a better way or worse way? Or? No. So you say other than seeing her, you talked about having actually a personal interaction with her on a couple of occasions. Describe for us what you mean by that. What type of interactions were these?
Very informal. I mean, how are things going? You know, what fields are you interested in studying, and you know, things like that. I really can't remember specifically what the conversations were about.
How quick were they, or how long were they?
Maybe 5-10 minutes.
Each or total?
Pardon?
Each or total?
Each one.
Okay. And was it each of those occasions you and her one-on-one, or under what circumstances did you come into contact with her?
She would be located in one of the offices that was under my supervision. One of them was the instructional support services. The other one I can't remember.
Okay. So then was Kathy one of these students who then ever came to you for this type of career advice?
No.
Was Kathy one of these students who ever took one of your pharmacology courses?
Oh, yes.
You instructed her?
That's a required course, and every student has to take it.
Okay. Do you recall any particular instances in that course where she came to you after hours and talked to you specifically about the course?
I don't recall that, no.
Okay. Was Kathy one of these students who participated in one of these specific programs, these 3 programs that you were in charge of, the research, the global health, the community?
No.
So, other than these couple of occasions where it sounds like you had some brief encounter with Kathy Durst, what other interactions did you have with her? If any?
None, I believe.
Okay. And so, time-wise, what's the amount of time you would best estimate that you personally interacted with Kathy Durst or spoke with her over the 3 years or 4 years of the medical school program?
15 minutes.
And have you previously said you thought it was maybe 10 minutes?
I might have stated that, yeah.
I guess what I'll ask you is, as your best estimation as you sit here today, would you describe your total interactions with Kathy Durst over the entire course of her medical school career as, how would you describe it in terms of the length of your contact with her?
Probably 10 to 15 minutes.
A brief interaction?
Brief, right.
And how certain are you of that? That they were brief, your total interactions with her?
Reasonably certain.
Well, when you say reasonably certain,
As I
do you think that perhaps you had hours of interaction with Kathy?
definitely not.
Okay. So when you say reasonably certain, are you saying, I'm only reasonably certain that it was 15 minutes versus 18 minutes versus 20 minutes?
Exactly.
Okay. How certain are you that your total interactions with Kathy Durst over the entire course of her medical career were brief?
I'm certain that it was very brief.
Okay. Did you have any knowledge about Kathy's background?
I'm not sure what you mean by background.
What she was doing before she came to medical school, based on a review of her medical records, her file.
You mean as an applicant?
Yeah.
Yes, I had some knowledge of that.
What was she doing?
Look, I knew she was a nurse. And that's basically it. I was not familiar in detail with her application.
At the time Kathy Durst was at your medical schools, were you aware that she was married to a man named Robert Durst?
I believe I became aware of that at some point.
Did you know Robert Durst?
No.
Had you ever spoken with him
No.
previously? Have you ever spoken to him, period, in your life?
Let's say that
Have
again.
you ever spoken to him, period, in your life?
No.
Did you have any personal knowledge, based on the interactions you had with her, of any of Kathy Durst's personal life?
No.
I mean, were there any personal problems or family problems she had personally?
No.
If someone were to say, if Dr. Cook were to say, if anyone in the administration talked to Kathy on a regular basis, it would have been Dr. Cooper. How would you respond to that?
That's incorrect.
If Dr. Cook were to say, Ms. Durst's principal contact in the administration was not me, but Albert Cooper, how would you respond?
Incorrect.
If Dr. Cook were to say that you infrequently, a student chose to work with you, and then you accepted that argument, how would you respond?
I didn't quite hear.
If Dr. Cook were to say that very infrequently, a student chose to work with you, Dr. Kuperman, rather than Dr. Cook, and then you,
That's incorrect.
if Dr. Cook were to say that Kathy dealt directly with you about everything, how would you respond?
Incorrect.
If he were to say that he dealt with you rather than consulting with him, how would you respond?
Incorrect.
If he were to say that she consulted with you rather than her assigned advisor, how would you respond?
Incorrect.
If he were to say that she consulted with you instead of the registrar, how would you respond?
Incorrect.
If you were to say that she contacted the school through you, how would you respond?
I'm not sure I understand.
If you were to say that she regularly contacted the school through you, how would you respond?
Incorrect.
When you say it is incorrect that Kathy dealt more closely with you than Dr. Cook, how certain are you? How certain is your memory? How certain are you? How certain are you?
You're going to have to repeat that.
When you say that it's incorrect that Kathy had more contact with me than Dr. Cook,
I'm certain. Very certain.
were you aware that towards the end of her medical school career, Kathy Durst had some absences?
Say that again, please.
Were you aware that towards the end of her medical school career, Kathleen Durst was having some absences?
Yes.
Were the absences significant enough where you were particularly concerned about them?
Yes.
Was she on track to graduate in time?
She was expected to graduate, yes.
Were the absences such or so serious that they would interfere with her ability to graduate?
Interfere with what?
Her ability to graduate.
Well, there was one particular clerkship that she was absent a lot in, and she had to repeat that. Once she would repeat that, she would be expected to graduate.
Okay. And did she have time to repeat that?
Pardon?
Did she have time to repeat that?
No, she never got to it.
Why did she ever get to it?
Pardon?
Why did she ever get to it?
She disappeared.
Absent, had she not disappeared, was there sufficient time for her to repeat that course?
Yes.
And she indicated she was going to repeat that course.
Right.
Do you know, do you recall, when these absences occurred in relation to when she disappeared?
Primarily during her clerkship year.
Third year or fourth year?
Well, that would include the fourth year as well. Yeah.
Was she having more problems with abscesses right before she disappeared or an earlier period?
I believe it was earlier.
How was she doing in medical school shortly before she disappeared?
She was doing quite well.
The last clerkship she was on, did she pass?
Yes.
What kind of remarks did she get?
What kind, I'm sorry?
What kind of remarks did she get? What kind of evaluation did she get on that last clerkship?
Well, we only have an honors, pass, and fail system,
Okay.
and she passed.
She
But
passed.
there were very good comments in her record about that particular clerkship.
What clerkship was that? Do you recall?
Radiology.
When we interviewed you, do you recall an interview that took place at your home in New York in 2015, particular in January 2015, with a lot of snow, a California person. Do you recall that interview?
Yes.
During that particular interview, or prior to that interview, had you had a chance to review Kathy's medical records, her registrar file, etc.?
Yes.
You reviewed that prior to the interview on that particular day?
No.
No. So when we met you at your home in 2015, you had not had a chance to review her registrar file, is that correct?
Correct.
Did we ask you some questions about what rotation she was in before she disappeared?
I believe I might have said neurology at the time.
Okay.
Can't explain why.
In your mind, you had in your mind that she was in neurology right before she disappeared.
Right.
Did we ask you questions about, prior to testifying here today, and did you have a chance to review? What would be the best evidence of how Kathleen Durst was doing in medical school, and what rotation she was taking and when she was taking it? What would be the best evidence? Where would you go to get that information?
I would go to her academic record.
And would you say that, who kept those records back then?
We have a registrar's office, and it's the function of the registrar to keep those records.
What was her name?
Lillian Lombardi.
Was she good at keeping records?
Pardon?
Was she good at keeping records?
Very good.
Would you say her records were accurate?
Very accurate.
When a class was passed or failed, when a clerkship was completed or a class was completed, would there be a record made of the evaluation of that course?
Yeah. All that information, the final grade as well as the comments, go to the registrar's office.
And the dates of those classes, the dates of those clerkships, they also go to the registrar's office?
Yes.
And is that information maintained in the registrar's file?
Yes.
Was it maintained there by Ms. Lombardi?
Yes.
And was it maintained there in the normal course of operations of
Yes.
the Albert Einstein Medical School?
Yes.
Prior to coming here today, did you have a chance to review her registration, her registrar file?
I don't know what you mean by review. Have I seen it?
Yes. And did you look at that?
I've seen it. I'm not sure I would call it a review.
Okay. Did you have a chance to, was it made available to you? Yes.
Yes.
Did you have a chance to look at the clerkships she had taken and the evaluations from those clerkships?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to look at the dates of the clerkships she was taking?
Yes.
Did that assist you in refreshing your recollection on what kind of student Kathleen was and what clerkship she was taking?
Yes.
Did it help you and assist you in refreshing your recollection on when she was taking those particular clerkships?
Yes.
she disappeared. Your Honor, I have a complete, what appears to be a complete registrar's file. It is based on LAGA 131376 through 131469.
And this is?
This is a registrar file for Ms. Kathleen Durst. May I mark this as People's One?
Yes, you may.
I'm placing a People's One in the lower right-hand corner. What is your opinion as the Dean of Education for 40 years at Albert Einstein Medical School after reviewing Kathleen Durst's file? What is your opinion? How was she doing in medical school?
I would say she did very well.
Based on your 40 years experience at Albert Einstein Medical School as the Dean of Education, what is your opinion as to whether the amount of absences Kathleen Durst had was going to interfere with her ability to graduate and accomplish her goals, but for her disappearance?
I'm afraid you're going to have to repeat that.
What is your opinion as the Dean of Education for 40 years at Albert Einstein Medical School after reviewing her registrar file, People's One? What is your opinion that given her absences, she was going to be able to graduate?
I would say she was still on target to graduate.
Had she not disappeared? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
You're familiar generally with the time period when Ms. Durst disappeared from your school?
Yes.
What was she doing? What clerkship, if any, was she doing prior to her disappearance? What was her last clerkship?
Radiology.
And you know that, and that's your opinion after reviewing this file,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And what were the dates of that clerkship? When did she complete it? And if you need to look at
In the
it,
month of January?
if you need to look at anything to refresh your recollection, let me know. Would looking at something help you refresh your memory as to the actual dates of that clerkship?
Yes.
Would that be the registrar file?
Yes.
You may approach the witness, or you may use the pencil projector. Projector?
Right there. I'm showing him page LAGA 131428. In People's One now.
Okay.
Send him on the dates first. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, you have a screen right there?
Right.
That's cool. You're on this first court I did.
Most typically, you're on the District Court when you receive your account.
Does this refresh your recollection of what the date of Ms. Durst's last clerkship was?
Yes.
What date was that? What was the date of this clerkship?
December 28th, 1981 to January 24th, 1982.
Okay. And did Ms. Durst pass this clerkship?
Yes.
Based on your review of the evaluation, if you just take a moment to review it, and I'd like to ask you a couple questions. How did she do in this course?
Looks like a very good performance.
Was it described as she was a very pleasant student who displayed a keen interest in the subject?
I didn't hear the question.
Did it appear that she was a pleasant student who displayed a keen interest in the subject matter?
Right.
And did it appear that she may have missed some sessions?
Yes.
Did that, whatever sessions, whatever amount of sessions she missed, did it interfere with her ability to pass this course and get good marks?
It did not interfere.
Did it appear, based on the evaluation, that she was quick in picking up radiological abnormalities and was a keen observer?
It appears that way.
Did it appear that she participated actively in group discussions and was eager to do a good job?
Right.
As the Dean of Education, is this the type of student that you would have been proud of?
Oh, sure.
Did she get very good in all her remarks?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
That she received very good in all of her comments?
Right.
So that clerkship ended on January 24th, 1982. Based on your review of her registrar file, Peoples 1, were you able to determine what date Ms. Durst was scheduled to begin her next assignment?
Yes.
Do you remember the date off the top of your head right now, or would you like to look at something to refresh your recollection?
I believe it was February 1.
Do you have any doubts about that? If you'd like to look to be certain, I want to make sure we get the most accurate testimony.
Maybe some doubt. I'm pretty certain, actually.
Do you remember what clerkship she was beginning on February 1?
An outpatient pediatrics.
Describe for the court, for the jury, whoever is watching you, describe what that is. What is that clerkship?
Interaction with pediatric patients in a clinical setting, which is outside the hospital.
How long was that clerkship supposed to be?
1 month.
And it was supposed to begin on February 1st of 1982?
Right.
Have you since looked at a calendar and known that that's a Monday?
Yes.
What hospital was she supposed to work at for that clerkship?
I believe it was one.
The clerkship, all the clerkships this fourth year, how long are they?
At least 4 weeks.
So none of them are under 4 weeks.
None of them are under 4 weeks.
So it appears that Ms. Durst finished her clerkship on January 24th.
Right.
And was set to begin her next clerkship on February 1st.
Right.
During that week, based on, as the Dean of Education, based on your 4 years of experience, what would she been doing that week?
That was a vacation week.
And is that something specific to Kathy, or did students in general have vacations scheduled?
The students have a 4-week vacation during that last year of medical school, and then it can be divided up in various ways, 2 and 2, 1 and 3, or 4.
Is it a fair statement that Kathleen Durst wouldn't have had any classroom work to do that year?
That's a fair statement.
That week? That year? For the last year?
Because she was doing the clerkships.
Yeah, because the fourth year students don't have classes, correct?
Right.
With some exceptions, though.
Some exceptions.
Rare exceptions.
And let's just make sure we're clear on this. Based on your review of the actual registrar file from Ms. Lombardi, did any of these exceptions apply to Kathy? Was she scheduled to do anything that week?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay. Finally, after reviewing her registrar file, Peoples 1, were you aware of what Ms. Durst's interests were? What did she want to do when she graduated? What type of doctor did she want to be?
My impression was that she was interested in pediatrics.
And do you recall where she wanted to do that? What community?
Montefiore or BMH or the Bronx Municipal.
And pediatrics
children?
Right.
By the way, People's One. The records I've shown you, those appear, they appear to be the records from Albert Einstein Medical School.
Right.
From the registrar.
Right.
You had an opportunity to look through that packet of the pages I showed you.
Yes. Yes.
Did any of the pages seem abnormal? Has they been altered or changed in any way?
No.
Did those records appear to be the normal type of records that you would observe for reviewing a registered
Yes.
file at Albert Einstein?
Yes.
And as a Dean of Education, how many of those types of files would you estimate you reviewed over your career of 40 years?
Very few.
Very few. But have you in the past?
Pardon?
Have you in the past reviewed them?
Yes.
And as a Dean of Education, had access to them?
Yes.
And as a Dean of Education, were authorized to look at them?
Yes.
And as a Dean of Education, were familiar with how all the information got into those files?
Yes.
And is it a fair statement that Mr. Lombardi, who likes to keep accurate records, would make sure that information made its way into that file close in time to when the events actually occurred?
Yes.
I'm going to take you now to a phone call that you received in 1982. You aware of what phone call I'm talking about?
Yes.
Have you been questioned about this phone call throughout the years by more than one individual?
Yes.
Do you have, as you sit here today, a specific independent memory of receiving that call?
Yes.
As you sit here today, do you have a specific independent memory of the substance of that call?
Yes.
At the time you received the call, at some point shortly thereafter, were you spoken to by police? Within a week or so, were you spoken to by police about that call?
Yes.
At that time, was it made aware to you, or, I'm sorry, did you become aware that, oh, this call is kind of a big deal?
Yes.
Throughout the years, were you questioned about the call?
Yes.
And did you continue to be aware that this call is of interest?
Yes.
When we met you in your home in 2015, what room did we sit in?
What room did you sit?
Yes.
We call it the study.
Yesterday when we met with you, what room did I call it?
The living room.
Did you let it go or did you correct it?
I corrected you.
Do you seem like, are you the type of person who wants to make sure that you are as accurate as possible about what you're relating?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us what you remember about this call.
It was a call from, it was a woman's voice. The woman stated that she was Kathy Durst and that she would be absent from the clinical duties. I don't know if that's the exact word she used on that day that she was assigned to. And I asked her why. And she said she had GI distress, that's gastrointestinal distress, some diarrhea, perhaps a headache was in there, I'm not sure. And for all those reasons, she didn't think it was possible to come to that club. And that was the first day of that particular closure.
About how long was this call?
Probably a total of 5 to 6 minutes at most.
What's the minimum amount of time this call?
The minimum? I could maybe 3-4 minutes.
It was a brief call, is that
It was a brief call.
as much time as it takes to relay the information you just
Right.
What day of the week was this call?
The day?
Yeah.
Monday.
What date did it call? What date did the call come? Do you recall?
February 1.
And did you recall that before yesterday, or did you have a better memory of the specific date after looking at the registrar?
I didn't recall that it was February 1 at first. But I knew it was a Monday because it's the first day of a clerkship. Always begins on a Monday.
Did you recall what year it was in?
Oh, yes. 1982.
Did you recall what month it was in?
Yes.
What month? What month?
February.
Did you recall when in February approximately it was? Before you looked at the registrar's file.
Beginning of February.
So you're saying that to get the specific date of February 1 from 30 years ago, you were able to look at the registrar file and determine the date the call came in. And do you have any doubts in your mind that the call came in on Monday, February 1st, 1982?
No doubt.
Approximately what time did the call come in?
It was the morning, but I could not state the time. But probably sometime after 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30-ish, something like that.
Sometime approximately 9:30.
Right.
Do you recall speaking to a detective by the name of Detective Michael Strzok back in February 8th, 1982, about this call?
Yeah.
When you spoke with Detective Strzok, were you doing your best to recall that it just happened a week prior?
Yes.
When you spoke with Detective Strzok, were you doing your best to provide the most accurate and truthful information as possible about what had just transpired in a week?
Yes.
And did you provide accurate and truthful information?
Yes.
Just to your ability?
Yes.
Okay. Did you recall telling him that the call came in sometime between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m.?
I don't recall that, but
Whatever you told Detective Michael Strzok would be the most, was truthful and accurate at the time.
right.
Thank you. Your best memories, you said here today, is that it was in the morning at approximately 9:30.
Right.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that it was in the morning?
No doubt.
When you spoke with Detective Strzok, other than what you've relayed here in court today about the substance of that call, were there any other topics discussed by the woman who was calling?
No.
Did the woman who was calling, by the way, it sounded like a woman?
Yes.
It was a woman's voice?
Yes.
Did the woman who was calling tell you herself that she was disturbed about having to make up time that others did not have to make up?
No.
If you had told that to Detective Strzok, where would that information have come from?
Dr. Cook.
Did the caller who called you ever tell you that she was disturbed about having to make up time that others did not have to make up?
No.
Are you certain about that?
It's very certain.
Did you know in your mind something based on Dr. Cook told you that Kathy may have been disturbed about having to make up time that others did not have to make up?
No.
You just don't have a recollection of that?
I have no. Excuse me?
You don't have a recollection of that?
Don't have a recollection.
Okay. When the call
team managers. I'm trying to understand how the phone systems work. It's a little different today. I assume there was no cell phones back then, right?
Right.
You had a phone on your desk
Right.
with a cord that went to the phone.
Right.
My kids don't even know that.
Right.
Who would have answered the call that would have come in, a call that would have come into your office at that period of time? Who would
Would be
have
the secretary in Dr. Cook's office.
And then what would that person have done? Why do you say secretary in Dr. Cook's office? Why do you assume that it would have been a secretary in Dr. Cook's office?
Because that was the rule if you were going to be absent from a clerkship or any clerical duty, you would call that office.
So you're saying there was a rule that if you were going to be absent from a clerkship, clinical duty, you would call Dr.
Well, actually, I should backtrack with that. The first person you notify is the physician in charge of that particular clerkship.
Okay. And that, why is that? Why would you need to call the physician who's in charge of the clerkship if you're not going to be there? It might seem logical to us, but tell us.
Clinical duties are taken very seriously. You are entrusted with the care of patients, and you're required to fulfill that duty. And if you're absent, unlike in a typical classroom setting, you must tell the chief in charge that you're not able to fulfill that duty.
Because if you're supposed to show up somewhere and you have duty somewhere and you don't show up, no one's going to be there to perform those duties, right?
Right.
So, are you saying in addition to calling the clerkship to let them know you're not going to be there, there was also some general rule that the students had to call Dr. Cook as well?
No, it's not a general rule. It's in this particular case.
Okay. What was your understanding?
I'd like to say that again.
What was your understanding in this particular case?
Dr. Cook was concerned about absences that Kathy Durst had during several of her previous clerkships, going back to the third year, and for reasons which I'm not completely aware of, wanted to make sure that she did complete our clerkships in time for graduation.
Okay.
And if there was any difficulties, he wanted to know about.
And this is something I'm assuming you remember based on the conversation you had with Dr. Cook?
Right.
Okay. How good is your memory of that?
It's not 100%, I can tell you that. But,
So, the call, we were talking about the calls, they would come into Dr. Cook's secretary, the call was made to Dr. Cook, and then she would transfer the call to you. Or she or
my secretary
to your secretary. And then what would that individual, your secretary, do with the call?
would call me.
And then they would transfer it to you.
Right.
We had discussed previously that your interactions personally with Kathleen Durst over the course of her entire medical career were approximately 10
5 to 10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
Okay. Had you ever spoken with her on the telephone before?
No.
Had you ever heard her voice on an intercom before?
No.
Had you ever heard her voice on a recording of any kind whatsoever before?
No.
So, are you able to say based on the voice that it was or wasn't Kathy Durst?
No.
Why did you think it was Kathy Durst calling?
She said she was Kathleen Durst.
She said she was Kathleen Durst. So, other than a woman called with a female voice, and this person said they were Kathy Durst, was there anything else about that call itself that told you this is definitely Kathleen Durst? Had you previously told police, I thought it was Kathleen Durst on the phone?
Yes.
Had you ever been asked by any police officer, any detective, any prosecutor, had you ever talked on the phone before?
No.
Had you ever been asked by any police officer, any prosecutor, any detective, prior to meeting Mr. Boone and I and Detective Shanley, have you ever talked on the phone before?
No.
Prior to meeting us, had you ever been asked, how long had you talked to her in total over the 4-year period?
I don't believe I was asked that.
Who was the first person or group of people to ask you those types of questions?
You and John Moore.
When you stated earlier that a student would have to call, Kathy would call. When you stated earlier, to the best of your memory, although you weren't sure how good your memory was, that Kathy was told to call in school if she was going to be absent.
Right.
If Kathy was going to do that, was there any reason she would also have to call the chief of the clerkship or rotation where she was supposed to show up to say, hey, I'm not coming?
She should have called, yeah.
Was she be expected to call?
She would be expected to call.
She already is having some absences, obviously, right?
Yeah.
It's time for our break. We're going to until 1:30.
I think we'll take our break now also. Makes sense. It's a logical break. It's a logical time to break this tape. So it makes sense for us to take 10, 12 minutes. So let's come back at 10 after 3.
We predicted that in 2017. We timed it. Recorded you.
Yeah, right. No. All right. Do not talk about the case or any of the people in it. Do not make up your mind about any issue until after you discuss the case with the other jurors during deliberations. We'll see you 10 after 3. Thank you.